Dan Illman, Mike Beer, taking a look at race number 8 at Gulfstream Park on Curlin, Florida Derby Saturday. Stakes action for sprinters going 7/8 of a mile. Here's the field for the $75,000 Sir Shackleton Stakes. It is a big field, Mike, but there really aren't any blazers in this race. Yorkton, the number 9. I would think that he's the expected speed. I do think that the 7 Jackson has it in him to show speed, but they've been content to sit just off of the pace.
Yeah, they might not want to, send him to the front end, but I think he's going to be forward like he was last time. Yorkton is a fast horse. He just doesn't seem like he's quite as good on this surface.
And the key to this race might be Vekoma, who is returning off of a lengthy layoff. We have not seen this horse since the Kentucky Derby. He won the Bluegrass last year. I wonder if George Weaver's using this race as a prep going short.
I wonder too. He's certainly a very talented horse, and I think he's going to be very tough in here if he's ready. But Weaver is one of those guys that and generally speaking, you don't really want him off of long layoffs.
Let's take a look at the Timeform U.S. pace projector. Yorkton couldn't make the lead last time out in the World of Trouble Stakes. Didn't break very well. Kind of got bounced around coming out of the gate. With a clean start, I think he can make the front in here. Frosted Grace, the 11. Well, she ran the other day. I would expect her to be scratched. And remember, visit timeformus.com after scratches are made official. This pace projector will change. The number 6 also expected to be close to the pace. That's home base. Let's start with Bourbon Calling, a horse that we expect to be far back. And I think a lot of folks are going to look at Bourbon Calling's last race at Mahoning Valley and maybe poo-poo it a little bit. I think that Steel Valley Sprint's a nice little race in the fall. The runner-up Manny Wah came back to run 3rd in the Malibu with a 91 Beyer speed figure, then ran 2nd in his seasonal debut at Oaklawn with a 92. And prior to that race, Bourbon Calling ran down a couple of good fields in Kentucky.
Yeah, he did. He's actually not that bad, this horse. He has a layoff to deal with here, and he's going to be far back early in this race. Neither of those are good things. But he's not untalented, and he's won at 7 furlongs before. Wilkes has 2 horses in here. I kind of like the other one a little bit better.
The other one's a little bit more accomplished than Bourbon Calling, that's for sure. Bourbon Calling, though, if he gets some pace, he can come running. Garner and Ty is the number 2. This horse really likes Gulfstream Park, but he has not been out since the Amsterdam at Saratoga when Chancelot just freaked out and ran away. He had no chance in that race, and he probably had no chance against Diamond Oops when 5th in the Grade 3 Smile Sprint 2 starts back. The race prior to that, he won by a country mile. It was a nice performance with a 92 Beyer. I'm just not sure what we're going to get off the layoff, but he's a little bit better than he looks on paper. He's been dirtied up.
No, I agree with that. He's a lot better than he looks on paper. You take out the last 2 that you just mentioned, and then take out the Holy Bull and the Florida Derby. I mean, those are races he was never going to win. Outside of that, he had a really solid year last year as a 3-year-old.
Last Judgment, one going a mile and a 16th at Oaklawn Park, and Todd threw him to the wolves. Ran him in the Pat Day Mile against Mr. Money. He was 9-2. Terrible post position. Mr. Money was on a roll. Ran him in the Pegasus against Maximum Security. Probably didn't belong in that race. Came off of a long layoff, and you don't worry about Pletcher horses off layoffs. It was interesting that Todd cut this horse back to 6. And he had to work, and I like that off the layoff. Let's watch Last Judgment's race on February the 7th. Didn't break really well from the inside, was far back early, came with a 4-wide bid, and he is able to wear these horses down. He was able to grind it out. I like him getting out to 7.
I did too. I really like this win from him, Dan. As you say, it was probably pretty tough for him to go 6 anyway, but you really want to go back and watch the beginning of that race because he didn't break great, and then he had a horse sort of drift over on him, and he had a steady early in that race. He lost more position, and he was last for a long way before he made a big run to get into it. I don't think that was a very strong field, but he ran really well on there.
High Riverside has some credentials. He won the Sunshine Millions Classic way back in 2017. He's banked over $440,000 the hard way. First start of the year, back in the Antonio Sano barn. Not really sure what his best distance is. I think 7 is good for him. I also think he's more of a stake-bred, restricted stakes kind of horse. This is a listed stakes race, but it could be a graded one.
Yeah, I think this might be a little tough for him. He's got some races that would make him a contender in here. He's going to be a big price. So I'm not going to knock him. I just feel like he might be in a little tough here.
Bourbon Resolution is up next for Ian Wilkes. This is a horse, they tried turf with him twice last year. Kind of interesting. They ran him in the Wise Dan, and run very well. They ran him in the Nijinsky and run very well. This is a horse that won the Ben Ali at Keeneland last year, going 2 turns. And I thought he ran a really nice race, showing tactical speed. Maybe it wasn't the greatest field in the world, but he got right up close to the pace and wore him down. And then the Ali Sheba, well, throw it out. He ran against McKinsey and Tom's D'Etat, 2 of the best handicap horses in the country. I don't like that they switched to turf. I wonder if maybe his feet were bothering him, and they were running him on the turf to keep it soft, and now it's a long layoff. Ian Wilkes usually doesn't win off layoffs, but I think it's very interesting that this horse won off of a similar layoff last year at Gulfstream, going a 1-turn mile. And he's got a little more tactical speed than people think.
Yeah, I agree with all that stuff. The layoff could be a concern, but I was sort of swayed by the win off the long layoff over this track as well last February. So I'm not going to worry about it too much. I do think that maybe there was an issue that caused them to try turf at the end of last year or the summer of last year. But prior to that, man, all of his dirt races were good. And as much as I respect him as a horse who has run well going long, he's run well going short too. 7 furlongs to a mile feels like a good distance for him.
6 is home base. This one's won 2 out of his last 3 starts, including this effort in the Rail Splitter Stakes. And this is one of those starter stakes races for horses that have been entered for a tag. Rail Splitter, home base won the Rail Splitter in really solid form. He was game to win. He was up close to the pace. He fought it out throughout. He's run well in 2 out of his last 3 races. The one time he was tested against Diamond Dukes, he was probably in a little bit tough. There's not a ton of pace in here. He likes the 7. Maybe he can work out a good trip.
Yeah, I like him at this distance, and I like his tactical speed. I didn't love that win that we just watched, because if you go back and watch the whole replay, on the turn, he was so confidently ridden. You thought he was just going to win off for fun in the stretch, and instead he had to really fight for it at the end. That didn't thrill me, but this horse is actually pretty good. I could use him somewhere.
Number 7 is Jackson, another horse that's won 2 out of his last 3 races. Now, he won the Grade 3 World of Trouble Sprint last time out. A, it wasn't the strongest graded stakes race in the world. B, he was very lucky to win the race. The odds-on favorite must have missed the break by 3 or 4 lengths and was flying at the end. While all that was going on, here's Jackson prompting the pace early, taking over the lead in the stretch, and really grinding it out nicely. He had to work hard to win this race. He earned a 97 buyer. He's always been a nice South Florida 7 furlong horse, and I think another good trip is coming.
Yeah, I think that's what you really like about him. You know, listen, whether he got lucky in this win or not, he still was right there the entire way. And it was still a relatively fast race, Dan. I mean, I just don't really have any knocks on him. I think he's getting another good trip in here. He's fast enough to win. He likes the 7 furlongs. I just think he's a horse that is very logical in here.
And as we mentioned in the opener, perhaps the key to the race is the number 8, Vekoma. Graded stakes winner is a 2-year-old going 1 turn in the Nashua, winner of the Bluegrass at 9 furlongs. They ran him in the Kentucky Derby. That was a bit of a disaster. Now, after that race, George Weaver obviously wanted to run him in some of the bigger races in the summer. He was prepping for the Dwyer. He grabbed a quarter before that race. Okay, they were going to run him at Saratoga. He came up with some bone bruising. And I like that Weaver just put him away. He's a nice horse. He's given him time to recover. Personally, I think this is a prep for something longer, but I think he caught the right field if he is sharp.
I agree with that. Generally speaking, again, I don't really like to take Weaver off of, longer layoffs, especially when they're going to be short prices. And it feels like Vekoma probably will be. But I also think he's the talented horse in the race, Dan. And I realize that he's a grade 2 winner at 9 furlongs, and I'm sure that they want to stretch him out again. I like him in these shorter races.
Yorkton is up next, and I would never sleep on a horse like Yorkton. Maybe he's not a dirt horse, and I think that's the big question that fans have to ask themselves before they back Yorkton at the windows. He certainly is a capable synthetic sprinter, and last time out in the World of Trouble, he was banged around at the start and couldn't find his customary spot on the lead. On synthetics and turf, at least, if you give him an easy lead, he can make you pay. I wonder if 7 is a little far for him, and I'm not sure about dirt.
Yeah, I'm still not buying into him as a dirt horse, although it's sort of interesting. You know, when you look at, he's only run on dirt 3 times. Every time so far, it's been off of a layoff, almost like they were just prepping him, and he didn't show his speed in any of those races. Now they're coming back for a second dirt start for the first time ever, so maybe he'll run better.
I wonder if I didn't rate the 10 He Hate Me highly enough, Mike. I liked his race in the Tail of the Cat at Saratoga, and he was the beaten favorite. He was battling with a couple of horses for the lead. He got run down by Bone Ray Zone, who was the best closer in the field and got the right setup. He sort of was knocking on the door in his next few races. I thought his Pelican was pretty good. Killybeg's Captain would be vying for favoritism in this race in the form he's in. Yeah. He Hate Me was 4 wide all the way on the backstretch, 5 wide on the turn under urging, and he's going to get up to be second best in here behind a sharp horse. He used to have speed, and if they could find some of that speed, maybe he could get up close to the pace. Maybe 7's pushing it for He Hate Me, but I think he's in sneaky good form.
I agree. I think 7 might be pushing it. That was the one thing that concerned me about him. The flip side of that is I agree with you. I think he ran really well last time in the Pelican and got a little bit unlucky.
Frosted Grace, the 11, ran on Thursday. We're expecting him to scratch out of this race. Majestic Dunhill, like Vekoma, returning off of a layoff for George Weaver. Now, as you mentioned, George Weaver does not have great stats off of a layoff. He's a fantastic trainer. It is worth noting that Majestic Dunhill won off of a pretty long layoff in 2018. Now, that race was on turf coming from way off of the pace. That's his running style. Here's what he did when we last saw him way back in June in the Polynesian Stakes. He didn't break very well. He was down on the rail. He's in behind horses. He's eventually going to alter down to the rail, and he's going to finish. That all sounds great, but this race went to closers. There was a pace meltdown.
Yeah, big, fast, contested pace in this race. He had the right setup, Majestic Dunhill did, and he finished very gamely. He just couldn't quite get there. He ran fine. He was in good form. At this time, Dan, it's a very long layoff for a horse who has very little early speed.
That's the main concern. This race to me is a spread race. I want to find a price. I'm not completely convinced with Vekoma. Jackson, maybe last time was the time at a big price. As we take a look at our picks, I throw my hands up. I pick Majestic Dunhill. Maybe it's the Laurel fan in me now starting to come out. This horse has run a couple of good races there. He's going to need a lot of things to go his way from a pace standpoint. He's going to have to be ready off of the layoff. Weaver sometimes doesn't have him cranked. But I just know the price is going to be right. Jackson has been in really good form. I think Last Judgment is interesting. I'm surprised you didn't have him in the top 4, but it's that kind of race. You can go so many different ways. And again, I understand Last Judgment's going to get bet too.
Yeah, I was torn between putting Last Judgment in there or one of my 3rd or 4th picks. I could have easily slipped him in, Dan. I'm just going to take Bourbon Resolution. I like his races overall. I'm going to trust Wilkes to have this horse ready. And he just feels to me like a horse who was going to be a price in here, despite his obvious credentials.
And that's one of the keys to the Sir Shackleton. Which trainer will have their horse ready off of a layoff? Because you've got several quality horses returning from long layoffs. 12-7-3-10 for me in a wide open race. 5-8-6-7 for Mike. It's the Sir Shackleton. It's race 8 at Gulfstream. It's a sensational Saturday of racing, and the approximate post time is 3 o'clock Eastern.